perspective and in a community engagement. You know, it's not just marketing. There we go. He's flying the colors there.
If you could see Jonathan with his
yeah.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final event of the 2020-2021 Atlanta Economics Club season. Before we kick off today's event, I'd like to make two club announcements. As you all should be aware, the Atlanta Economics Club holds elections every 2 years for its executive committee positions. So at our April meeting last month, we announced the election. We emailed out a ballot following that event to anyone that has attended an event in the past year, any of our virtual events. And then votes started trickling in until about 11 a.m. this morning when I closed the ballot. And so I'm really excited to share with you today that the election results are in, and our incoming Atlanta Economics Club president will be Ibrahim Bayan from CBRE. And so Ibrahim, if you'll give us a wave, congratulations on that. Mike Skordeles from Truist was voted in as our AAC vice president, so welcome, Mike. Daniel Butrago of Southern Company was voted in as our AAC secretary, so Daniel, if you'll give a wave. And last but not least, Jonathan Smoke from Cox Automotive will remain our AAC treasurer. And so it was overwhelming, overwhelming results. So thanks everyone for participating in the election, and congratulations to our incoming board. Additionally, I want to make an announcement that Kayla Reynolds from Cox Automotive and Megan Hauk from the Atlanta Fed will also join the AAC board starting in September. And they'll be filling non-executive committee positions, so no vote was required for their positions. Kayla's going to join us as the membership chair for AAC, and Megan will join us as the NABE liaison with our national organization, National Association for Business Economics. So congratulations also to Kayla and Megan, and we're excited to be working with you. So the second announcement is that the new board will break for the summer, in terms of having meetings with everyone. And the new board will work diligently to hammer out the program for the 2021-2022 season, which will reconvene in September 2021. So we've been keeping a close eye out on the pandemic, the vaccine rollout, and return to work plans. And as of today, it looks like many workplaces are in the process of starting to invite their employees to return to the office, either now or kind of through the summer and into the fall. And so that aligns with the time we plan to reconvene AAC meetings. But that said, the posture on holding events and inviting non-employees into office event space still remains unclear, at least for the offices that we're kind of tied to, that the AAC board is tied to. And so therefore, the Atlanta Economics Club plans to continue to host our events virtually as online webinars, at least through December 2021, and possibly afterwards. We're going to keep an eye on everything. The situation will certainly evolve, and we'll monitor things, and we'll provide updates on our plans as we know more. And so just keep an eye out for communications from us. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead. Let's kick off today's program. We are pleased to have with us Dan Corso, who is president of the Atlanta Sports Council. For those that aren't familiar with Atlanta Sports Council, its mission is to facilitate the growth and development of sports in Metro Atlanta, and they serve as a recruiter for major regional, national, and international sporting events. The organization works to drive economic growth and visibility, and also act as an advocate for teams and annual sporting events. And as I think everyone who lives in Atlanta is aware, we've had the great fortune of hosting several prominent sporting events over the past few years, and Dan, I think, was a key to making a lot of that happen. And so Dan joined Atlanta Sports Council in 1999. And so he's been with the organization for a while, and I think has a lot of insights that he will be able to share with us today. Dan will be joined on the virtual stage by our very own Mike Skordeles, who will host today's fireside chat. As many of you guys know, Mike is a senior U.S. macro strategist with Truist, formerly SunTrust Advisory Services. In addition to keeping an eye on a close eye on evolving economic conditions, Mike is also an avid sports fan, and so I couldn't think of a better person to moderate today's conversation. And so with that, I'll close the introduction and pass the mic to you, Mike. Take it away.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks, of course, Dan, for joining us and everyone else. I was super excited when we had the opportunity to have Dan join us today. Just again, as Jessica mentioned, I'm a huge sports fan, but I'm also an economist. So this is a great intersection of my sports love and my economics love. So Dan, let's start a little bit with, it might be it seem a little minutia, but how the Atlanta Sports Council fits in with some of the other organizations, whether it's the, College Football Hall of Fame and some of these other organizations, particularly the Metro Chamber and that sort of stuff. So just
Sure.
let's kind of set the table, if you will.
Yeah, happy to, and appreciate you guys having me on. Understand, Jessica, from that intro, I'm the last guest for the season, I guess. So it's a case of definitely not saving the best for last. But in any case, I do appreciate you guys having me because sports is really an important part of any fabric of any city. It's part of the culture, and it's really becoming more and more important to communities across the country, not just from an economic standpoint, but from a community impact or a social impact standpoint. It's really becoming one of those key drivers when people kind of look to where they want to live, right? And raise a family. And I think sports has a way of, in a really good way, blending into a community's culture to offer those things for people to go do or be a part of. But Mike, you bring up a good point. Our organization, and Jessica, you mentioned I've been with it since '99. Some would say that's way too long, but it's been a good opportunity and a great place. So I've just loved it over all these years. But we're unique in a way in that we are part of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Every city in the country, big or small, has a group like ours we all do the same thing. We all go out and recruit sporting events to our respective communities for those various impacts that those events bring. Now, the differences are, it's just the scale of the event. Cities like Atlanta are built for Super Bowls. Cities like Columbus, Georgia are not built for Super Bowls, but they're built for youth baseball tournaments, which could be an equivalent impact of a Super Bowl for Columbus. So we're all doing the same thing where we're out marketing our region or our part of the state, in our case, Georgia, or the country to say to these events, this is why you should come to our location. We can host you. We can put your event on in a successful way. It's just the way we do it. It's a little different because of the way we're built. We are, as I mentioned, part of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and we are the only sports commission or council in the country that is part of their local chamber. Most of them are part of their local convention and visitors bureau or independent. And the reason they do that is because they're funded through perhaps some of the taxes that they help generate. If they're part of a CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they bring an event into their community, well, that generates hotel motel tax in some capacity. A portion of that hotel motel tax goes back to the operating budget of that said sports commission to keep their operation going and then to keep the events coming in. We're different. We're part of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, which is a nonprofit. We're privately funded. We don't receive any public money. So that's good in a way, but that's also challenging when it comes to how we self-fund our organization. But we like it because it keeps us connected to companies like Truist and Southern that have been mentioned here today, and others. All of the companies that see why sports are important to the community and want to give back to our organization financially to help us do what we do.
So you touched on a number of things there. One that kind of triggered in my mind was there's the national events, but then how about some of these smaller events that are, and it's seemingly, and I'm not a runner, but I know a number of others that there's seemingly some sort of road race every weekend, seemingly, or certainly major ones, almost once a month. Do you guys have involvement in some of those things, or not so much? Is it mostly just the larger marquee events?
Yeah, well, most of those events are privately owned. Like a lot of the 5K runs that you'll see here in Metro Atlanta are part of the Atlanta Track Club, which is an incredibly successful running organization, one of the best in the country. They're on our board of directors, and so we then support them where we can, whether it's volunteers or just local advocacy, which I think Jessica mentioned in the intro. That's an example. We advocate for the Atlanta Track Club and the Peachtree Road Race and all the good that they do in our community through the sport of running. But in some way, we also look to partner with them. In the case of the college football national championship that we hosted in 2018, one of the requirements for a host city from the CFP, the organizers of the event, is to organize a 5K run during that weekend to support the idea of a healthy lifestyle and giving back to a youth component that the CFP had tied in with local teachers. Well, we're great at recruiting and we can host events, but we don't have the staff big enough at the Atlanta Sports Council to organize a 5K. So we partnered with the Atlanta Track Club in this particular case to execute that event for us. So that's an example of something that we bring outside in that has a component within the event that we then engage a local partner to come in and help operate. So I think that answered your question a little bit. You know, most of the annual events here are privately organized, privately run and owned. And so we support them where we can, but our core business is about outside in, recruiting those events that are in a competitive bid process with other cities and doing our part to make sure Atlanta's on the rotation of hosting them.
Yeah, well, you guys have obviously done a great job of putting the best foot forward for the city and for the region to bring in some of these events, both, again, big and small. You touched on a point I'd like to follow back up on. And before I ask that question real quickly, the Q&A is open. So if you want to ask a question to Dan, please put it in the Q&A and more than happy to pass it along. But so this component of bringing in other organizations, also some of these events are very, very, I mean, literally international, but most of them are national in scale. How much of that is local sort of talent and jobs created versus it's the Super Bowl and there's a kind of mechanism and, you know, that sort of thing? There's a lot of people that are, if you will, full-time Super Bowl people, even when it's the middle of summer and it's not the Super Bowl. We know that there's permanent staff that the NFL and the organizations have. So talk a little bit about that. How much kind of local job growth ends up because of these events, that sort of thing? Nope, you're muted, Dan.
I don't have any data with me, but I do know that depending on the size of the event, the temporary jobs do grow, particularly in the hospitality sector, right? The hotels ramp up, the restaurants ramp up because of the visitation that they expect from that event. And again, it's all on scale. We're talking about City of Atlanta, Metro Atlanta with a Super Bowl or what would have been a men's Final Four last year. That same concept applies to any other region or city within the state of Georgia on an event that they may be hosting. That's not on that level, but still the concept is they have to build up and you know, go after that event. So I would tell you that we're also working on organizing the event once we do recruit the event here, once we get the hopeful good news of a successful bid and recruitment effort, we then turn around and get into the planning mode for that event. And that's a little different than some other sports commissions across the country, whereas perhaps they act more of just a sales agent. And then once the event gets recruited to their city, they'll step out of the way in the planning. What we do is we ramp up our staff and form what we call a host committee. It's not a fancy term, but it's you know, I think appropriate to really host the event in a first-class way by the requirements of the event and across a number of different operational and logistical things that we have to perform leading up to and during the event period itself. So in the case of the Super Bowl, we went out and hired 15 or so people for you know, and on independent contracts, but for some pretty long-term, years, 6 months, 18 months, whatever it may be, to build up for that event. It all depends on what the event requires. Some events require 2 years in planning. Some events like the World Cup, which I'm sure we'll talk about if we're successful there, require 3 to 4 years of planning. So our staffing will build up based on the requirements. The reason we like to kind of keep it in-house, Mike, and build it up and then organize the event is because as kind of the group that's at the forefront of the recruiting effort, which is done years and years and years in advance of actually hosting the event. We're in the know and as part of those negotiations with the event as to what we can agree to, what we can't agree to, but need to modify, what we negotiated on capacity or pricing or payments or whatever it may be, to help put on the event. If we disappear, then a lot of that institutional knowledge during the bid process disappears, and then it just kind of gets out of whack. So we like that consistency of being the group that's recruiting it and being the group that's organizing it, so that we're kind of integrated throughout the whole thing. And I can tell you this, the rights holder of the event enjoys that as well, because they know that the people who are there talking to them about what we can do, or they're also executing the event.
Knowledge, you know who the players are, you know who does private security for these big sort of events, you know who does traffic control, you know who in the city or the state is running some of these different agencies that support or you might need approvals from. So yeah, obviously, right. Yeah. Let's talk again just a little bit again, not to focus too much on the minutia, but just helping set this stage. How does a city and land one of these events? Is it an RFP kind of request for proposal that they're doing, or is it driven more by, like in the case of the NBA or MLB or the Falcons having the Super Bowl? Is it the Falcons driving that we get the Super Bowl, or is it Atlanta Sports Council driving that we get the Super Bowl?
Well,
how's that work?
Great question, and it's pretty much the same, although it does vary based on the event itself. So a professional boxing event will more than likely directly approach the venue, in this case State Farm Arena as an example, and negotiate the terms and the dates. They don't issue an RFP. The NFL will issue, as you said, an RFP and send it out to, in the case of the Super Bowl, pre-approved cities. So the Falcons, if they were interested in Atlanta and the team hosting a Super Bowl in the future, are required to be pre-approved by the NFL to receive the document and then therefore get into the active bid process, as the example for the Super Bowl. The NCAA, or the men's or women's Final Four, any of their championships, basically puts their RFPs out to the country and says, come on, come on. Now you kind of get filtered out based on the size and the specs, and you may or may not be able to fit what they're asking for space-wise or size-wise or logistically or even date-wise. You may just not be a fit, so you kind of fall off. But at the end of the day, it is an organized bid process that with an RFP issued from the entity to the cities. And our role is to kind of quarterback that process. We are kind of the managers, because at the end of the day, the Falcons, in the case of a Super Bowl, have a team to operate on a yearly basis, right? And they're in the middle of a very, now even longer season, football season during the bid process. And they also, in our case, have a building to operate. So they can't work on the day-to-day minutia of a bid for the Super Bowl, which the last time we were involved in one was about 14 months long. You need a group like ours to kind of be that intermediary between the league, the city, and our partners during that bid process. And that's really the role that we play. We promote, we market, we provide narrative, we negotiate, but we also kind of manage and quarterback all of the details that go on during that bid process between the event owner and our local community partners.
Yeah, so we're getting a couple of questions in here, some very good ones. So one is, are consumer preferences within a particular region also taken into account as to how they pick some of these? So I'm assuming is it more of a football city or a football region or that sort of thing, or basketball or something else?
Yeah, good question. I think you could look at college football as a great example of that, or collegiate sports in general. But Atlanta is the capital of the epicenter of college football, if you will, not only in the Southeast, but nationally. And that's proven because of the amount of alums that we have within a 2 to 3 hour driving radius between the Southeastern Conference and the Atlantic Coast Conference. And the fact that we're in a 2 hour direct flight from, I think it's like 80% of the population can fly here. So college football fans from pretty much all over the country can get here pretty easily. we've got the infrastructure for big events, and then we just have that general passion for college football within the South and within Atlanta and the state. So yes, I think all of that together is very attractive to the CFP championship and to what the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl team does here locally in attracting these non-conference matches or games here in Atlanta. So yes, college football is a good example of consumer preference. There's a market here for college football. The rights holders of those events and ESPN recognizes that, so they want to be kind of in the middle of all of that. Another good example is soccer, and what Atlanta United has done to our soccer profile, not only nationally, but globally. And the fact that we're now a soccer mecca because of what they've done and known for soccer, and it continues to grow and grow and grow, not just from a fan standpoint, but from youth activity, youth participation, it's growing. So that's helping us tell our World Cup narrative as to why the World Cup should have a significant presence here in Atlanta or FIFA during the 26 World Cup because of our soccer, community that we have and the hotbed that we've become in that sport. So I think those are pretty good examples of what that question is looking for.
Yeah, perfect. So touch on one of those, and you're a man in the know. How surprised are you by the success from a fan standpoint that the Atlanta United has had on the it's really to some that are not soccer fans. My friend Jonathan Smoke on our board is a big soccer fan. How surprised are you that essentially came out of nowhere for most people from a sports perspective?
Well, I think Jonathan could probably give a better answer, but I'll take a shot here. I would, I don't think you could ever doubt Arthur Blank and what his organization does, particularly from a marketing perspective and in a community engagement. It's not just marketing. There we go. He's flying the colors there.
If you could see Jonathan with his.
Yeah. But the way they've engaged in the community, the marketing aside, was pretty incredible. The way they kind of got community buy-in from the very beginning. But I think the story that they have to tell and how they've built it with Arthur and Darren Eels and Carlos and everybody else at the franchise, it's been incredible, and just how quickly it came. I think winning the cup, in their second year, I think also helped catapult kind of winning helps everything, right? And everything. So I think that also helped jettison their popularity. But what they're doing from an attendance standpoint and just sustaining it, you saw the match this past weekend. I had 40,000 plus people when they opened up. It's just amazing. And FIFA has recognized it. We continue to remind them of it every time we speak to them about our bid. The Atlanta United and soccer passion, but also the facilities that we have with the Atlanta United Training Center up in Marietta, which is first class. We're proposing that as a training site to FIFA for the teams. We're putting that brand in the Atlanta United out as far out as we can in that bid.
Yeah. So you bled into my next question, and we have a couple questions along that line. Talk a little bit about the FIFA. It is 2026, so it's out there. That's of course, it's a huge international event, so it has a much longer ramp up time to get everything ready and have everything in place. And in many cases, other cities around the world, it is usually cause some sort of construction of a new facility or an upgrade of a facility. Talk a little bit about the potential of Atlanta being a host city for the 2026 and kind of what generally, or what you can share, I should say.
Sure, happy to. So this bid process began in I want to say 16 was the first correspondence I had with the organizers of the North American bid. Remember now, this was a bid put forth between U.S. Soccer, the Canadian Soccer Association, and the Mexican Soccer Association to team up in a tri-country bid to FIFA to host the event in all three countries at the same time. First, it's never been done before. And so we were contacted to see if we wanted to be a part of that, to be one of the cities on a list to FIFA to say, if you select North America in 26, here is one of the many cities that you could potentially host matches in. And so we did the due diligence with the United Bid Committee, as it was called, for the North American bid, no relation to Atlanta United. But thematically, it was united between three countries. So the United Bid Committee, we worked with them. We worked with Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, the ACVB, and others to say, okay, do we want to throw our hat in the ring in this opportunity? Because if we do, and FIFA selects North America, then we are committed to going after and being a part of the mix. And so we, of course, did. We found it to be a beneficial opportunity to go after. And North America won. The United Bid Committee was officially named in 2018, I believe. And then we got to work on the individual bids for Atlanta after that time period. It was kind of interesting because all of the cities in the US were kind of unified and helping North America win the bid and the rights to host 26. And now, since that's happened, we're all like not talking to each other. We're all competitive. We're not sharing our secrets or issues with the bid because we want our part of the tournament. So it's been kind of interesting. But yeah, you mentioned the fact that it does seem like it's a long way from now. I mean, here we are approaching summer of 21, and if we're successful at the end of this year and we're named a host city, it's going to be here in 5 years. That is, I promise you, that will fly by. It'll be just like tomorrow when it's here. The thing about the World Cup that's different that we have not seen here since '96 on the Summer Olympic Games is the size and the scale and the duration of the event. The FIFA World Cup's a 30+ day event. It's not just matches, but there's fan fests and there's media broadcasting and there's things that take place for over 30 days in that World Cup period during July of 2026. Our Super Bowl just 2 years ago was not Super Bowl Sunday, but it was 9 days prior. We had a 10-day Super Bowl. This is 3 times at least of the Super Bowl period. So the magnitude is much bigger than a Super Bowl. The impacts, both economically and tourism and marketing and visibility wise and community wise, are much bigger. The costs are also much bigger, but we believe, based on some studies, it's well worth the effort and the cost.
Good. So excellent. One of our best and former AEC president asked a great question, and it's right around that what you just finished with, which is the funding and that sort. So how do you determine the size of the bid, and when or how does it determine that, oh boy, that's just too much, or that's too rich for our blood, or you know what, we need to find an additional funding so that we could land this giant event? Talk a little bit about that.
Good question, and it's kind of the latter, Mike. The answer is usually falls to, well, this is too good of a piece of business to say no to if we have an opportunity to secure it. So let's find a way to make it happen by getting it here and then finding a way to make it happen to underwrite the cost. And we've been really successful going back through the years in doing that. I think the biggest hurdle we ever have to face, and it's a good thing for our community, is that we're also a top 5 convention city in the US, which means the hotels and the Georgia World Congress Center are booked pretty much year round when things are in a non-pandemic state. And so we sometimes can't fit a big sporting event in because hotels and venues are already booked for a big convention. So we have to be really close with the ACVB when we are to really study, okay, this event falls during this time period, what are the openings? And that's why sporting events are getting smarter now. They're bidding more years out at one time, cycles or rotations, and they're also bidding them farther in advance, much like conventions do. They bid 6 to 10 years in advance so that they can take advantage of cities like Atlanta, or be a part of a city like Atlanta that has conventions. The events want to try to fit in, so they've got to try to reserve those dates. So that's kind of our process as we look at the events, what fits on the calendar, is it seem to be economically feasible to be able to underwrite the costs, and then what's the return to the local tax base, to the community from a legacy standpoint, what kind of things can we create that when the event leaves, continues to impact the community in a good way. Our Super Bowl is a good example. We have a legacy that's still going. Down at John F. Kennedy Park in the city of Atlanta, we raised about $2.5 million to refurbish that park as a Super Bowl legacy. And so now kids can come out and enjoy that park day and evening. And that's a lasting legacy of our Super Bowl. So I think at the end of the day, it's a matter of finding out, what fits, what's the timing, and do we have a story to tell to make the event successful?
So you perfect segue into my next question, which is,
I swear we didn't rehearse this.
tell the story. Well, over the telling the story. So Atlanta and Georgia generally has become a mecca for certainly the movie business and the TV business, a long history there, but it's increased. And certainly we have things like the NBA on TNT and those sort of things that are broadcast from Atlanta all the time. Talk a little bit of how that increase in the media presence has helped the Atlanta Sports Council land some of these, because some of it's certainly the live event itself, but another piece is this, we have to show it to everybody else that's not here. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the fact that we are a top 10 media market, I think plays into the fact that, stories will be told here, because it's not all about on-field content for these big events. There are stories off the field that happen in a good way, things that are happening in our community because of that event. I referenced John F. Kennedy Park. The NFL took that and ran with it during Super Bowl week, and they did quite a few stories about that. We're looking at, with the FIFA World Cup bid, not only securing matches and hopefully the semifinal as part of the FIFA World Cup in 5 to 6 matches, but we're also interested in being the host for the International Broadcast Center, which is kind of the media hub for the entire tournament. It would be here in Atlanta, and the almost 2,000 media, as I've been told, would call Atlanta home for multiple months on end, leading into and during the tournament, and then leave to report on their respective matches that they're covering in different parts of the country, and then come back to Atlanta as their home base. And then, so you've got a tremendous amount of media calling Atlanta home, global media and national media here for some time if we're successful in that. Think about the stories and the platform that provides us as a community, Metro Atlanta, state of Georgia, to tell some unique stories about our community and our state to a global audience. The opportunity where these media outlets are not always going to have time or enough content for soccer matches. They're going to look for other stories. So what can we talk about in our film and industry here? What can we do to talk about our foodie culture that we have here? Or some of the unique things, how can we feature the Beltline, to our media who might not have seen anything like that in the world? So that's part of our discussion now and our strategy and our pitch to say there are things here in Atlanta that will be good for you to report on and good for your media to create content on, which FIFA is interested in, because it's, while the matches are important, it's a long period, as I mentioned, over 30 days. There's a lot of downtime in between the matches.
Well, and frankly, having the infrastructure to host 2,000 people, let alone media people. So having the technical wherewithal available in the city to do those sort of things is huge too.
Right.
So,
and having the airport, right. And having, the hotels around Hartsfield and the hotels in downtown, and now media who have to get in and out of Atlanta to report on World Cup have easy access to the world's busiest airport, can fly in and out and come back. So, it sets up very nicely for us. The bid process for the International Broadcast Center has not started yet. Mike, FIFA is going to name the host cities for the matches, and then they will begin the bid process for the IBC. And we are one of the few cities that they're going to select to bid on that. So we're excited.
Wow, that's huge. And when generally, do you know when that's coming or no?
FIFA has told us, now again, we were supposed to be confirmed, cities were supposed to be confirmed last year, but everything got slowed down, as you can imagine. As did everybody's world. So it's understandable. Now it's December of this year. FIFA will announce the 10 US host cities. There are 17 currently remaining in the US, trying to be one of those 10. And we're doing everything we can to make sure we're one of those 10. But we expect a site visit from FIFA sometime in the third quarter, pandemic pending, of course, that they'll come over and we'll have a 2-day technical visit with them to talk through our bid and our negotiations and continue to tell our stories why we should be a great city. And then they'll decide at the end of this year.
Yeah. So let's go back to the in-person. It's obviously very important, but you pointed out a really fundamental change in how these marquee events have evolved to really become a sort of festival, week long or perhaps longer in the case of FIFA, maybe perhaps even month long, but it's turned into a festival. And I remember certainly the Final Four, when the men's Final Four was here, and certainly the Super Bowl, but other events as well. It's turned into this festival. Talk a little bit about what goes into that planning. How much of is it driven by the event itself, kind of their home office or their organization, and how much of it is, hey, we could pull off this really cool thing? Talk a little bit about that, Dan.
Right. Great question. And there's a lot of kind of layers to it. In my opinion, they are good to have a fan festival, if you will, associated with these big events, because not everybody gets access to tickets to the games themselves. Super Bowl is a great example. It's impossible to get a Super Bowl ticket. But if you have an organized fan fest taking place outside of the stadium on game day and days leading into the game, that is free to the public, that offers family entertainment and live music and food and beverage, well, that's just part of the vibe and the energy of the overall event. So that's important to create so that your local Georgians and Atlantans have a chance to come down and experience the big event. It's also very important for us as a local host committee because that helps in our fundraising. We have assets within our fan fest that we can package and sell into our corporate community who might want to be sponsors of it. That sponsorship money goes into our overall operating budget to help put on the event, as I mentioned earlier, on finding ways to underwrite it. So it's good for citizens, it's good for our fundraising efforts, and I just think it brings a fun, unique atmosphere, and it takes the overall event from just being inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium in this case to being outside in our championship campus, as we call downtown. In the case of the World Cup, we have a unique strategy. I think it's unique because I've heard from FIFA and US Soccer that no other cities pitch this. So let's don't spread this around anyway. But we very much see the chance to host the World Cup in 26 as a state of Georgia hosting, not just city of Atlanta and downtown. Meaning we have pitched the idea of having fan fests all over the state of Georgia, in Columbus, Macon, Savannah, Augusta, Rome, Cartersville, all the way up to Blue Ridge, LJ, wherever communities would like to host during the World Cup period, as long as they hit certain things that people will require from a branding and a entertainment standpoint and a structural standpoint, cities can come out and create their own fan fest. We think that adds to the energy and the vibe and really tells that story that the entire state is celebrating the fact that we've got the world's most popular sport in our state for 30 days during the World Cup. And while the matches are happening in the city of Atlanta and downtown Atlanta, other parts of the state get to celebrate, this great sport and this great event in their own unique way and show off to the tourists who are coming into Atlanta for the matches, who have time to potentially travel to other parts of the state, which drives tourism. Show off what you have to offer to people who may not have visited you in the past. So we think that's pretty unique.
So a couple questions here, kind of around, I guess, how the ASC kind of flexes up employment, and you're coordinating between these large events. So do you maintain, like, is it vendors that are doing it, or are they kind of permanent staff, or like you've mentioned earlier, some are contracted? How do you flex up the manpower to
it's
deal
kind
with
of
all that?
Yeah, it's a hybrid. So we've got 3 on our permanent Atlanta Sports Council staff, including myself. So we each take a role on the host committee based on background and skill set. Then we'll go out and independently, we'll get a independent contract for the other positions. And those could be marketing, public relations, operational logistics, volunteer programs, accommodations, transportation, all kinds of things that it takes to kind of plan and organize a major event. And then where we need to, we'll go out and engage with outside agencies to help, supplement what the staff is doing. So that could be branding agencies, marketing agencies, transportation, logistical agencies, whatever it may be. But let's not forget the city plays a big part in the planning with their staffing, the state where we need, potentially their staffing, and then the ACVB with their staffing and the Falcons with their staffing. Depending on the event, we engage others. But we usually employ anywhere from 7 to 15 people, just depending on the size of the event, as an independent contractor.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that you guys do it a little different than most others, as far as cities that are combining the recruitment and organizing and administering, so, but they're not as kind of cohesive as you guys are, it sounds, because there might be different organizations within whether it's Convention and Visitors Bureau, et cetera, right?
Yes. Yeah, correct. And a lot of sports commissions are bigger size staffs than we are. We have 3. The average right now is about 6, 5.5, I think is the actual average number. So let's call it 6. So we're understaffed as it relates to other sports commissions. But they have more, because of their CVB status, they have more generalists who are selling conventions and sporting events and corporate events and specialty events. So we are just focused on sporting events, both on the recruitment, or as we call it, development, and then the planning and the organizing.
So let's think about the future. We got a few minutes left here. Let's think about the future. So first part is maybe a layup. How much is COVID and the pandemic? You mentioned some of the FIFA stuff getting a little bit staggered because it should have been done in 20. Talk a little bit about the near term, kind of how has that complicated things?
Yeah, it's well, I think it's been complicating for all of us, right? It's so good to see the crowds coming back. I referenced the Atlanta United and the Braves homestand now. They've got huge crowds. It's great to see that coming back. I think that's giving everyone hope that we can, at least us, do our business the way we used to do it, which is in person versus a Zoom setting like this. It's much easier to look someone across the table and commit to something and let them know you mean it across the table than it is on Zoom. It's just, but that's the way it's been. But we see it getting back to how it used to be done. That's a way of saying that it hasn't really slowed down what we do. It's just slowed to how we do it. The processes have changed. Timelines have been delayed, obviously, but I will tell you, throughout the end of last year, the bid process with FIFA on the World Cup really slowed. I mean, it just slowed, but ever since February of this year, it's been picking up. We've had multiple meetings with them via Zoom and a site visit, and just it's picking up rapidly.
Yeah,
which is a good sign.
My next one. How now that everything's seemingly reopening quickly, or at least the expectation of reopening quickly, not just in Georgia but nationally, is how quickly are these events going to start ramping up again and knocking on the door saying, hey, we want to come back to Atlanta?
Yeah, and don't forget, I mean, again, I think it's a somewhat of a blessing to have these events bid out so far in advance. I mean, we're looking at an event that I can't really disclose right now because we're still kind of in a NDA, but for 2031, that's 10 years from now. But the work has begun. Feasibility studies have begun, and we're kind of kicking the tires on them. They're kicking the tires on us. So it's 10 years from now. And so if we've got issues like Corona 10 years from now, we got bigger issues we're all dealing with. We're gonna have zombies walking around if that's the case. So
that's a different industry.
Yeah, right, right. So,
All right. So, all right, here's where I'm going with the next one, which is it's the future, but it's not because there's a lot of things happening.
yeah,
Talk about esports, and there's a fan experience there. Obviously, Turner has a lot to do with some of these esports things. What is the ASC doing with esports? How is that evolving? Where do you think that's going to change things?
yeah.
Or, blending of some of these things. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. That's another benefit of being part of the Metro Atlanta Chamber is that we have connectivity to other parts and business of the Metro Atlanta Chamber on the economic development side, right? Which is all about corporate relocation and corporate growth, recruiting companies to come in or growing existing companies. Well, one of the things that we formed in working closely with our econ dev friends at the Chamber is the Atlanta Esports Alliance. And it's an entity that we formed underneath the Atlanta Sports Council, and it is dedicated solely to esports and the growth of esports. And it's not just about recruiting esports or gaming events to Atlanta, but it's also help supporting the companies that are here from a technology standpoint, whether they're game developers or software developers or the hardware manufacturers, helping that ecosystem here grow. And you're right. I mean, esports is booming. The numbers back it up. I don't have them with me, but I do know that it's growing on a global basis. And with Turner engaged in it, other companies here in Atlanta, we've got multiple professional teams here, High-Res Solutions, our software developers. Skillshot is a big producer of events. All of their leadership is on this Atlanta Esports Alliance that we formed. So it's a big focus for ours. It's a little different than your traditional sports like Super Bowls and World Cups and men's Final Fours, is that it's not really organized globally because there's not one entity that's overseeing it like FIFA oversees soccer, NCAA oversees amateur sports, the NFL oversees professional football. So we're dealing with a lot of different groups, but our interest there is really on the economic development side. Is there a venue that we could perhaps build here in Metro Atlanta that's built for esports or help, get companies off the ground that are looking to get into the software, the technology, or the hardware and the equipment. And then there's of course always the large scale events that esports has that, if they want to look at Atlanta, we certainly would chase it.
Great. We're kind of winding down as far as time. Again, if folks want to ask a question, you certainly can in the Q&A. We're still evolving some of these. Certainly the pandemic complicated some things, but we're still evolving, and it sounds like the timeline of bidding out and capturing and planning for these events has lengthened. Do you anticipate that that's one of the ramifications of COVID as well, is that we're going to continue to extend these planning horizons, besides the fact that they're just very big, complicated events to pull off anyway?
Yeah, I do. And I think there could be a trend coming that would be interesting, where an organized bid process perhaps goes away and events begin to negotiate directly with cities for a particular year that fits for the city, and instead of the dog and pony bid process where we're better than them and we're great here, and it's more okay, this is what we can offer. This is why we're great for your event. These are the dates that work. Can we find a way to make that work? And getting them to a more direct negotiation. There's perhaps on another call we can get into how that's good and perhaps challenging, but I think it's interesting that it could be going that way. I'm not saying it's because of COVID, but I do think COVID had kind of a part in that events now can just pick up a phone and call a sports council across the country and say, hey, we're interested in your city. These are the years. Can we make this happen? And, we can get right through that.
Well,
it might take a little bit of the fun out of it though.
Yeah, but isn't it sort of also evolving, not just nationally, but internationally? And we're thankfully on that international stage, that there's really kind of come to a haves and have-nots. Either the city or the region has the infrastructure to host these events, these types of events, these big events, or they don't. And really we're kind of getting away from, it sounds, particularly even with the Olympics and other things with this, we're going to build all the venues from scratch the way they did 25, 30, 40 years ago, when every venue was brand new, to we've got to figure out a way, whether we're calling it sustainability or other things, that it sounds like the world of large events, particularly for sports, are going down that path. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, maybe they're going only to certain markets because of the size of them and the cost, quite frankly. And not every city can afford to or is willing to put forth the cost to host an event of the large scale. But other cities make up for the fact that they can't get big, what we call mega events, a Super Bowl, but they can get smaller size events, but they get them more often. You know, we go after the big fish, but the big fish happen only every 3 to 7 years on rotation. So you hope you slot them out to where every 2 years you've got a big event coming out. We've been successful in that strategy, but other cities in the country are going after smaller scale events, but having multiple events per month, every day, you know, every month of the year.
Right.
We're not built like that. That works for other markets. I think our strategy for Atlanta has been successful, and that we go after the bigger events and host them on a regular rotation, but then seed them to where you've got something every 2 to 3 years.
Are you suggesting more like a Omaha or Williamsport kind of college World Series, Little League World Series, that you're having more smaller events?
There's a city in Florida that does a really good job of going after youth events, and they seem to have a youth championship or tournament of some sort, national, every weekend, and you know, within their community, and that works for them, because when you add all that together over the course, that's impact happening often, but they're not a suitable city for the large events because they can't host them. They don't have the infrastructure, venues or hotels or transportation, or you know, just the general infrastructure you need to host these big events, these highly attended, highly visited events. So they go after the smaller things, but they have them more often.
Yeah. Touch on a little bit again. We're economists, so we put our, you know, dollars and cents hat on a little bit more than most. Talk a little bit more about the kind of economic impact. You mentioned restaurants and hotels and some of those sort of things, but this cadence of having them every couple of years, it almost seems like it's a semi-permanent, if you will. Now they may shift from venue to venue,
Yeah,
but
right.
there's a lot going on there. Talk a little bit about that, please.
There is, and part of the reason why we don't pursue those types of events on a regular basis is because, one, again, we're a convention city, so we don't really have the dates available to go after them. But we also have events here that call Atlanta home on an annual basis. I mean, you can look at every month of the year. We just got done with the senior men's championship this past weekend up in Gwinnett, which was on national television, right? The Mitsubishi Classic. We've got NASCAR racing now has got 2 races a year again. We've got the Tour Championship. We've got Augusta, and yeah, I'll take liberty and say Augusta's Metro Atlanta. Why not? It's part of our golf story. You know, we've got a tennis event in July, pro tennis event. We've got college football the entire fall. We've got the Peachtree Road Race. I mean, we've got Road Atlanta that has a national motorcycle event. I mean, we've got every sporting event that you would want besides hockey here throughout the entire year. And so our role is to help complement what's already based here every month with that outside in every other, you know, few years. And so, you know, I would argue back to you, Mike, that we've got activity every month on a calendar year because of what's based here and what calls Atlanta already home, or already calls Atlanta home.
No, great point. So one of the questions is, it's going down a little different avenue, and you can defer it if you want, but it's asking about FanDuel taking up space in Midtown, and not specific to FanDuel, but this idea of sports betting and that sort of thing. I'm sure the ASC doesn't necessarily have a dog in that fight, but what do you think that, how do you think that complements or doesn't complement these big sporting events.
Yeah, it's certainly not our driving lane there. And then I did see the news. I think it just helps build, whether one agrees with what that company does or partakes in what that company does or does not, that's fine. It is still an industry within the segment of sports, right? And so that the more companies and organizations that we have in Metro Atlanta or the state of Georgia that are connected to sports in some way, I think the better for us. I'm not saying that by the time hopefully World Cup comes here in 26, sports betting will be legalized across the country or not. It very well may, it may not, but to have a company like FanDuel here calling Atlanta home at that time, I think that can only be beneficial to our story as why we have everything to offer these big events when they come here. And FanDuel, I'm sure, is a sponsor of a lot of these events or leagues that have these events. And so, much like when FIFA hopefully selects Atlanta, they have Coca-Cola as one of the worldwide sponsors. Well, don't think we're not playing that as well to say, hey, Coke lives here, you should have your event here, right? And so there's opportunities, I think, and we would certainly look at that opportunity to help our narrative.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen a change in the last, call it decade, of the sports leagues shunning the sports betting concept and embracing it. And now it seems certainly the big three, basketball, football, and baseball, that they've embraced it. We'll see how that evolves.
I agree.
Yeah, there's one last one asking about the successes that the Savannah Bananas have had, and are you aware of any other sports teams that are drawing useful lessons from that experience? I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to as far as what experiences the Bananas have had, but
Yeah, I wish we were live in person. I could ask to educate me on the Bananas. And I'm not familiar with the Savannah Bananas. I apologize. Baseball. I'm assuming they're baseball. Got to be baseball. Minor league baseball.
I think they are. Although the previous iteration was the Sand Gnats, as far as the minor league baseball team. They rebrand and do those things much like the Gwinnett Stripers did here, formerly the Braves and what have you. But
I apologize to whoever asked that question. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, no, that's not
but
one
if it's
that's
popular. But if it's popular in Savannah, I'm sure they're doing a great job. They're capturing a market, right? Again, it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It's entertainment value within the community that's part of the culture. It's part of the fabric. Part of what makes Savannah cool is the fact that the Bananas are, a big part of it and successful.
Yeah, well, so we're kind of winding up, getting to the top of the hour here. Dan, a lot of great insight. Very much appreciate you sharing what you can. Certainly,
Sure.
Things that are already public and what have you. Unless you got any breaking news here at the last second.
No, nothing breaking. But I do appreciate you having me, Mike.
Well, very much. And you were very modest, saying that you weren't the best for last, but we definitely saw this as one of our marquee events for this year. So very much want to appreciate you and your time, Dan. And then, our constituents, thanks everybody in the Atlanta Economics Club for joining us today, and those that you're going to watch it on our YouTube channel. Very much appreciated. We will see you back in the fall for the beginning of the next season. As Jessica mentioned, we are going to be virtual for the next few months, starting the 2021-2022 season. Jessica, any last points you want to pop in there?
No, Mike, that covers it all. But thanks so much for a great conversation, Mike and Dan. This was a fantastic way to close out our 2020-2021 season. And thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll be in touch on what's to come. So thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.